most of us are left wondering what this means for our economy, the man on the street, and the way forward. To shed some light on these matters, please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists who will debate this in much more detail. We have the Honourable Minister Kalishetwine, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Johannes Gabachab, the Executive Chairperson of EOS Capital. We have Mr. Sven Thieme, the President of the NCCI, Ms. Adeline Beerkes, the Senior Tax Manager at KPMG, Mr. Bruce Hansen, the Managing Director at Simri Storm, and Ms. Hilda Basson Namajeva, who will be the moderator for the discussions. Can I please ask the panelists to join us on the stage?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This feels a little bit like Parliament. So I'd like to, just by way of introduction, just remind our panelists that you have to switch on your microphone to your left or to your right, depending on how you're seated, to your left ideally, and keep the button on. And then the moment you've finished speaking, addressing the specific point of view, then I'd like to ask you please just to remember to switch it off. I'm very honored to be here with you this afternoon to moderate this discussion. So what I'd like to do now is to quickly allow the panelists just to make a statement, an opening statement, on no longer than 2 minutes, and then we will interrogate the questions. We will also at some stage during the discussion come to you on the floor, so if you'd like to prepare some questions already for yourself, write them down. If you're too shy to read them out yourselves, otherwise, we'll just ask you to pose those questions directly to the floor. So about 15 minutes, we will be present, busy here, just up here on the stage with questions and answers, and then after that, we will come to you on the floor and come back again to our panel a little later in the program. We have an hour. We want to do justice to the time we have available and also to engage the relevant issues this afternoon. Honourable Minister, I would like to give you the opportunity for an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. So I've got 2 minutes, so suffice to say that I welcome this occasion, which has now been an institutionalized event. It's very good to engage, and I hope I will, together with my fellow panelists, be able to do exactly what you expect from us. The budget's theme is a pro-growth consolidation path that we will want to implement over the MTEF. The question is why we have taken that approach. Let me start with the consolidation part. Basically, what has happened is we have reached our self-imposed debt stock limit of 35% of GDP. We stand now at 37%. Our currency has lost 30% of its value in the last 3 months. Our revenue is underperforming. Economically, our region has faced a slowdown that is commensurate with the global slowdown, but sharper than that. So we have to ready ourselves to live within our means. That is actually what it means to consolidate. We cannot ignore the negative effects that influence a small open economy. What we have to achieve is we have to, through consolidation, gain some ability to create physical space with which we can mitigate externally induced shocks. That's the big risk of a small open economy, and that's why we have to consolidate. On the expenditure side, have we managed to be pro-growth? Have we managed to be pro-poor? And have we maintained the ability to develop the economy? Of course, I would say yes, we have. If you look at the split between society. There are serious pockets of poverty or vulnerability in our society, so it is justified that the social sector attracts the largest portion of the budget, around about 47%, with education and health the main beneficiaries of that allocation. Education, because it is, yes, partly a social sector, but secondly also an important economic sector, because the skills gap and the skills needed to grow the economy are crucial. We have maintained our allocation to the safety and security system. That is one of the important enablers for the economy to grow. You have to have stable, politically stable and safe environments to place your investments. You must have surety that that is safe for the long haul. Therefore, we cannot relent on resource allocations to the safety and security sector. The economic sector equally attracted resource allocation that maintains it. We need to make sure that the pro-growth elements are still maintained in the budget, and we need to grow the economy to open up economic opportunities for the poor, for the low end of our society. Lastly, administration. We feel that we must engage in very serious reforms in the administration of the public sector as a whole. We have to look at SOEs. They are not performing. We don't get the returns that are commensurate with our investments there. Our civil service, our wage bill is a serious problem. We have to devise quite decisively measures to cap that without pouring fuel on unemployment. We have to be serious with our performance management strategies in all public entities, whether it is civil service proper or state-owned enterprises. Performance management is only good if there is a consequence as a result of your performance. If you do well, you must be rewarded. If you do below expectations, there must be a negative consequence. Only then will the performance management system that we've introduced bear the fruit that we hope it will.
Very good. Thank you, Honourable Minister. May I ask Mr. Team from the NCCI if you could just make your opening statement, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hilda, and thank you, Honourable Minister, for your opening statement. From our side, we believe that the budget took the right direction. I think the pillars are spot on, and can address the issues we have in the country and take us to the next level. The question I had to myself, thinking, what else could one do? I think, and there's a start in it, that we move away from punitive measures to more incentivized measures. I think if we can be more incentivized, I think it would be very encouraging for entrepreneurs and so forth. The issue I have is I'm worried about the execution. I'm really worried about the execution. What I see some of the SOEs are doing, it's currently in this time at the moment, if we are still not performing as we do. And Minister, you said we need to address that. And I also believe that we have small examples such as we hardly or soon have no water anymore in Windhoek. And with all the budgets, allocations and so forth, the number of businesses will be forced to close. And then what's left of, and how does that contribute to poverty? So I honestly believe and understand, for example, that we have apparently water reservoirs or reserves in Windhoek up to 7-8 times under Windhoek. I just fail to understand why we're not using it and understands very basic issues we have that we are not using it to overcome the issues we have right now. So for me, the big question I have, we need to execute in this country, we need discipline to be able to alleviate poverty and to take our nation to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Governor.
Thank you. I think directionally the budget statement was consistent with the 4 objectives the Minister has put out. It was generally a very encouraging budget given the unfriendly global and regional economic environment. The budget statement was generally reflective of the state of the economy. I think there were some deep cuts aimed at fiscal consolidation, but I also think the Minister has kicked the can down the road, and the real pain will come through in 2017, 2018, when the deficit is going to be reduced from 7% to about 3.7%. That's when we're going to see some of the real pain. I think for me the concerning aspect of the budget is the increase in public debt that has increased from about 36 billion Namibian dollars to close to 60 billion, and the debt servicing cost that has increased also from about 2.5 billion Namibian dollars to 3.1 billion Namibian dollars. And there's a very good reason why it has increased. But one needs to remember, and I don't have to tell the Minister, that the debt servicing cost is very vulnerable to domestic interest rate environment, and to a lesser extent, very vulnerable to movements in the exchange rate. And the Minister indicated the exchange rate at about a weakening of about 30%. I think a very welcome and a significant policy shift was around the SOEs. Indicating for the first time that we can consider partial listing of some of the SOEs is a very welcome move. I personally believe there's a case to be made to merge SOEs like the DBN, the Agribank, the SME Bank, and if you take the financing arm of NHE, those things can be merged so that we can get some duplication out of the way, getting governance right, and getting efficiencies. Maybe let me stop there.
Mr. Hudson, please.
Good morning, everyone. I think it's difficult for me to balance my own budget, and so I would like to congratulate the Minister, the Honourable Minister, for presenting this budget to the nation. And normally with budgets, what you have is there's always tension between and amongst the different needs. So I just want to say thank you, Honourable Minister, for presenting that budget and for being brave enough to present a growth-friendly fiscal consolidation budget. I think being the person that has to probably speak on the economy, I will do the following. It's on the one hand and on the other hand. So a couple of things that caught my attention is that if we look at what is commendable is the fact that we had an increase in the social grants, and that was more than inflation, and that to me is a good thing. And the Minister also spoke about the poverty eradication. But what I failed to see in the budget was, apart from the social grants, what happened to all the other specific measures around, I think, OVCs and also the youth. So, on the one hand, it's a good thing, but I think there's some. On the other hand, we just need to look at what are the other things to ensure that we focus on poverty eradication. I think the others are, we're talking about no net. The Minister has talked about no net increases in the civil service. That also is commendable, because what you don't want to have is a bloated civil service. But then on the other hand is where will employment then come from? Because we're looking at youth unemployment of about 42%, if I remember correctly. And so what do we have here? Is it the one or the other, or how should we look at it? There's also the increase in domestic asset requirements. So on the one hand, what we have is you have localization of assets, and then on the other hand, you're sitting with the capital that you have in the market, and where will that capital be channeled towards? And then, like Mr. Gabachab, I also have an issue with the growing public debt. It's about 68% growth that we've seen. Debt servicing cost of 24%. That to me is, it raises a red flag. And then the last point I want to make is that if you look at the resource allocation. Resource allocation alone does not mean that you will achieve the desired outcome. And I know that the Minister has also mentioned in the speech that we're talking about implementation. We're talking about specific targets. I just want to see how that will unfold. And I think maybe with budgets all over, it is always the question of how will we implement what we've now put into this budgetary framework. Thank you.
Speakers.
Good morning, everyone. From a tax perspective, there weren't really any surprises besides the fuel levy that's going to be increased. In terms of rates, I personally didn't expect any change in rates because although we're saying that we want to increase revenue collection, it wouldn't make sense because we've just decreased the corporate tax rates and a couple of years ago individual tax rates, so it would have gone against what we've done before. I really support the Minister in a consultative process that he wants to follow with regard to the solidarity tax and other things that he wants to take on. I think it's great that the Minister wants to consult with us as the private sector. What I'd really like to see come through is that when those bills are actually drafted, that the private sector gets an opportunity to look at those and comment on those, and that governments would formally respond to those comments and say why we are keeping things, certain aspects within the legislation and why we would remove other aspects. I think that will help a lot in interpreting the legislation and just where we have such wide areas of interpretation to be more exact and direct. In terms of the solidarity tax, it sounds like it's going to be more of a wealth tax than a solidarity tax per se. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing how that's going to work. And also the finalization for the implementation of transfer pricing. We've always had, or for most years, we've had transfer pricing in our legislation. It just hasn't been formally imposed. And I think that's one of the ways we can use what we already have to gather revenue, to increase revenue collection. So it's things like that. It's getting the administration of inland revenue up to speed, because once those things are in place, I believe that we're going to be collecting more taxes just by using the tools that we already have. So I look forward to the Minister to just maybe talk a little bit more around the revenue collection versus using the tools we already have, as opposed to introducing new taxes that we may not always know how they should work or how they should be implemented.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, maybe for us, just to kick off this discussion and talk about the policy issues. I've heard a number of people say, we say this, but we go in that direction. So, Honourable Minister, I'd like to hear specifically from you. As we sit in this room, we have a National Development Plan 4. We also have the President speak to the issue of Harambee consistently and has promised to do the official launch of that prosperity plan for the nation when he delivers his State of the Nation address. Then also there is emphasis and a huge paradigm that you're proposing in the budget for growth and investment, while at the same time that we can't cut down on unnecessary expenditure. But we all at the same time have these huge inequality challenges. How do we synergize all of these priorities around central policy so that we all move in the same direction? So that the legislature, for example, when they debate these issues, they understand what the core issues are. But in essence, my question is really policy synergies. Are we talking to each other just as we sit here this morning?
Thank you. Better coordination of the policy-making effort is a crucial matter, and I think there is some improvement possible. But that also speaks to the consultative process that we need to engage in and move away from the them and us attitude when we talk about public and private entities. I think we are all in the same boat, and we should do these things together. With regard to Harambee and the development plans, I think our take is that NDP 4 is in its last year. So next long-term planning exercise will be NDP 5. What the President has done with the Harambee high impact plan is just to upfront put the emphasis right, that we know where the emphasis in NDP 5 must fall. So I don't think it's a duplication, it's an directive giving or direction giving plan that would then slot into NDP 5 and the following MTES. So it has also something to do with resource allocation and policy development and planning. That's my take. So there's no overlap, it's actually a complementary approach. Now your other question is the more complex one, and that is how do we dovetail all our policies that speak to eroding away inequalities and eradicating poverty. And I think we must appreciate that poverty is a complex, multifaceted phenomenon that one must approach in a similar fashion. You cannot have, there's no silver bullet that would solve all of it. What I think is happening is, and I will try to, by way of an example, explain it. We have now a Procurement Act that does a number of things. First of all, it will restore the integrity in the public procurement system, which has been lost in the old system. So the transparency and accountability aspects will be improved through the new legal framework by dividing and splitting responsibilities, and by making procurement rules applicable to the whole public sector, whether it is a local authority, a regional authority, or an SOE. The same standards are required. But what it also does, it enables us to improve our ability to incentivize local sourcing through procurement. If you source locally, you will attract procurement. It will enable us to generate multiplier effects, economic multiplier effects into the economy. And with that, it will create employment and it will create economic opportunities for the hitherto left out. So here's one tool, that's procurement, that speaks to creating employment, creating economic opportunity, and results in poverty eradication or alleviation. We have the new investment bill, which follows a similar pattern. It doesn't close the door for foreign direct investment, it is very much needed, but it carves out areas where our majority that has been disadvantaged and has not had similar or equal economic opportunities. It carves out opportunities for those. And again, the result of that is that economic opportunity is created, and the spin-off effects are job creation, wealth creation for that section of the population that has not benefited. So we can go through a number of these things. NEF is nothing else but that. Our charters that we have developed, whether it's the financial charter, the mining charter, now the retail charter, it's all aiming at the same set of issues, and that is to bring about a structural transformation of the economy, that it becomes more inclusive, that wealth is less focused, that opportunities are wider spread, and with that, growth is stimulated and the job market is increased.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tima and Mr. Galahad, I'd like you to address the following matter. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversation in this country about, for example, our reserves, and the Minister also again spoke at length about it yesterday with his delivery of the budget speech, that defending our reserves. Our ratings are in place. We don't have the problems our neighbours have down south. And that is obviously an important enabler for foreign direct investments. I'd like to hear what are the other enablers we need to like to have addressed in the budget to address foreign direct investment. Are we seeing optimal engagement with foreign direct investments? Are we doing enough to get people to come here to our country to invest? And do we see a reflection of that in the budget? Yes, we've heard about the legislation, changes coming, the Investment Act specifically, but what else were you looking for in the budget to address the foreign direct investment increases that we need to have in this country? Any of you can go first.
Let me try and go first. And I think it's quite important. If you're an investor, what are you looking for in any country? You need some policy stability and predictability. And in Namibia, I don't think to a large extent we don't have that problem. Although some people would say NIF is a noise now. So what we need to do is to package the rationale of NIF to some of the people better than we have done. I think the Minister has done a great job in trying to stabilize our foreign reserves. Because if we have not done that through the Eurobond loan, we know the consequences of what happened with your borrowing cost. We know what happens with the capital flight. I think that was a good move in terms of having our ratings. I just don't know if the South Africans are downgraded, whether we will be totally unsketched. That is something we need to debate. What is the thing that I was missing in the budget? I think the biggest challenge facing our treasury is not the middle line, it's the top line. The problem we've got is with our revenue. And if you can look at those three lines, the top line, the middle line, and the bottom line is, actually our top line, if you even look at the estimates for the previous one, the Minister said the actual turnout is probably going to be 58, and we've got the SACO thing. So what we should be doing is to explore alternative sources of revenue. And the Minister started asking, and I'm welcome totally the proposed change in domestic asset requirements from 35 to 50. You have to use your own savings to develop your country, whether people like it or not. I'm very supportive of that move. We need to look at alternative sources of revenue, particularly when South Africa is going to grow by 0.9%. That gives you an indication what's going to happen with SACO revenue. The Minister says it's going to be 1.2 or something like that. So whether it's 0.9 or 1.2, that's a big thing. And the imports that we have got in the subcontinent is such that we'll have, probably for the foreseeable short term, challenges with SACO revenue. So for me, the biggest challenge, the biggest thing that we have missed out is alternative sources of revenue. And I could see even the development budget, it's come down to about 13.5 billion Namibian dollars. And the Bank of Namibia is telling us the country has got a shortfall of infrastructure projects of about 150 billion, and there's such a massive shortfall that we have got. How can we look at helping the infrastructure development without putting everything on the balance sheet of the government? And I think there's innovative ways as a country that we could look at. We don't have to put everything on the balance sheet of the government. There are some commercial infrastructure projects in this country that can be done without the government necessarily taking them. So can we identify bankable commercial infrastructure projects and be innovative around funding them? I was missing that.
Stephen?
Yeah, it's always easy to talk firstly. I know that the Minister's doing his utmost. I think also addressing the basics. I think it's one of the issues we've got in this country, that we dreaming too many times instead of doing and executing things. That's why I also love what the Minister said. The private sector and the public sector has to come together to address these issues. So, to see how we can change things. And I always say, if we don't take the people out of the street, we will be taken into the street. Have we done enough about foreign direct investment? If you really think about it, my view is that for somebody to put money into your country, or so many people that have this money, they take it as a very sensitive think for that, and maybe that's the next level where we can move it to, probably could be doing more in terms of attracting foreign direct investment. That's what I said earlier as well, maybe going the route of more incentivized versus punitive in terms of some of the measures we take. And then to what Johanna said, I mean, I think if you just look at some of the balance that we have in that if we could invest in energy like sun, wind, we could very quickly become an exporter of energy. And then I'll ask myself the question, what's in the way? Why haven't we done it yet? And unfortunately, we all know it's always politics in between. And there's a few people that want to beneficiate at the expense of the poor.
Yeah. When you listen to that, you kind of you really think about it. What's in the way? It's a very simple question. And I think that's where we want to go with the conversation. We want to simplify conversations so that we can find the answers, because I think the answer is found in the collective. Maybe I can come to the lady. We have Ms. Beekers, who's our tax expert from KPMG on the panel. There was mention made of additional sources of revenue for government. Obviously, you've spoken about the fact that no new tax legislation was introduced, but you'd like to see more efficiencies in that regard. Can you speak to that and whether it is systems problems that you envisage that could unlock better revenue collection for us? Or do you just think there are ways in which we're just not looking at these things? They are obvious sources of revenues, or we're just not looking at them? And what would they be?
Well, I think most taxpayers know that at inland revenue, the administration is not always what it should be. So, for example, you're not getting your VAT refunds as quickly as you would want them, or your returns are getting lost, etc., etc. So, what's happening is that where us as tax advisors could be helping the taxpayer to plan something, an investment in the most tax efficient way, our taxpayers are now paying money for us to sort out things at inland revenue. If you just think about where that money could have gone and could have been better invested, that's a simple example. I believe, like I said, for example, on the transfer pricing, that's something that's always been there. And I do believe that money is being transfer priced out of the country, which means that people are using ways to move money from the country to another country where you pay less taxes. So if we can identify those transactions and we can make sure that that tax is being paid in Namibia as it rightfully should be, then already we're using a tool, but we're already collecting more revenue. Just on the foreign direct investment, for example, we don't have a statute of limitations. So, and this doesn't speak so much on the administration and efficiency, but I just want to link on to the foreign direct investment. We don't have a statute of limitations, which means that Inland or the Ministry of Finance can go back as far as possible to reopen assessments. Now, for a foreign investor, you're investing into Africa, and you're telling me that the Ministry of Finance can't just go back 3 years or 5 years, they can go back as far as possible. How do I curb that risk? How do I make sure that if I'm investing into a local company, I'm not going to be opening myself up to risks from 1950 or 1940 that I have no idea, or there's not even documentation anymore to look at. It's those small things that you can look at to make sure that foreign investors invest and that what we have, we're using efficiently. And then the other point I wanted to raise was just our officials at inland revenue. It's difficult to speak. There are some really good officials, and I want to commend them for it. Some really good officials who know their work and who know the legislation. But then there are some other officials who don't know that so well. So trying to implement the act or talk about the act is very difficult. And you may find yourself talking about things that could be easily resolved. Also, that's the same official who's going to assess your return. So if that official doesn't know simple things, administrative things when they're talking to you, how that that official is assessing the return in the best way and in the most efficient way. And that's also where all of these disputes come from. We're in a revenue saying one thing and the taxpayer is saying another thing, and we have no practice notes that's going to guide us in terms of interpreting the legislation.
Thank you very much, speakers. Mr. Hansen, to bring you into the conversation, the Minister talked at length. I wish I had the time to have counted, Minister, how many times you said fiscal consolidation yesterday. But it happened quite a lot, and that tells me that this must be something that is clearly very important to you. So, Mr. Hansen, fiscal consolidation is then the theme, at least from where I sit. Let's talk about SOEs in this country, state-owned enterprises. First and foremost, I can imagine that at some stage we must do a review on how many SOEs we have in the first place in the country. I'm sure that some of them have lost their development agenda long ago. Some of them should have been phased out long ago. New ones are constantly being introduced. So I'd like you to speak to how many of them do you think there is a case for what I'm saying? Are there SOEs that should have been phased out in line with our development agenda? And then specifically, because you obviously work closely with the stock exchange, the Minister's recommendation yesterday in the budget about partial listing for some of the excellently or well-performing state-owned enterprises.
I think one of the, if I look at what the Minister has said in the budget, and obviously this is very commendable, the fact that the Minister has mentioned that we need to look at the privatization of some of the state-owned enterprises. And I think
privatization, Minister? And I can imagine the union is being very worried about that privatization word. Just to be clear, is it privatization?
The partial listing.
Very good.
Sorry. The partial listing of state-owned enterprises. I think that's something that I feel is a really very good initiative, because sometimes what you have is if you look at different state-owned enterprises, and we can mention some of them. If you look at even Transnamic, if you look at Air Namibia and some of the other state-owned enterprises, I mean, really at some point in time we need to say to ourselves, look, this thing is not operating optimally. This thing is not operating efficiently, and we need to have a plan to make sure that we cut away what we need to cut away. I think for too long we've been prolonging an unhealthy situation in our state-owned enterprises. And so I think that is one way of government almost exiting or at least de-risking in terms of that partial listing. And I agree with you, and I would like to link this point with what the Minister said earlier on with the different measures that are being introduced, like for instance the Procurement Act and the Investment Bill. I just would like to see that we are at a point where at some stage, and maybe regularly, that we measure what we've put down. So if it's a case of a Procurement Act, what do we really want to, what is the objective of that Procurement Act? And do we do regular checks to make sure that we actually are on the right path? Because certainly, if you look at our SOEs and the question that you've asked, we should have done that review a long time ago, and we should have made a decision a long time ago. I'm looking at some of the, if you look at our water situation, suddenly it looks like we are responding and reacting to a crisis situation. And the facts are clear. The facts are Namibia is a semi-arid country, for instance. So we know that we probably have some kind of water problem. So how do we address it? Is there some kind of strategic way? Is there a strategic plan? And do the different things that we talk about, are those things talking to each other so that we can actually have a plan on the table that can work? And I think the same thing, Madam, is when it comes to state-owned enterprises, we should have that strategic outlook on how we want to see things develop, and then make sure that we measure those at critical points in time.
Mr. Governor, if you'd like to make a contribution.
You see, I just wanted to add fiscal consolidation and the extent to which it relates to SOEs. I think in layman's term, at least in my book, fiscal consolidation talks about how do we reduce deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product. That's at the end of the day what we are trying to do. So if we have to do that and we talk about SOEs, we mean how do we make sure that the transfers and the bailouts to the SAEs are reduced over time. So if we have to do that, clearly there must be a plan to do that, and for the first time, there is a very important policy shift. There is a whole reform around parastatals that we see in our country. So some of the parastatals have lost focus. You know, some of the enabling acts of some parastatals were done about 20, 25, 30 years ago, when the economic environment in Namibia and the development role of the parastatal was totally different. We are living now in 2016, and we are still trying to manage some of our SOEs with the environment in which the Enabling Act was created. So we need to change that now with all these reforms that we are talking about, and we need to change the transfers. And the minister has done a great job in trying to cut that middle line, to stop these transfers as far as he could. There are some that he can't at this stage, like the railway lines that we need to do, and the ports and energy, things that we need to do still needs to be done. But I see for the first time, we are trying to really halt those bailouts of parastatals.
Thank you. I think there are two areas where I want to quickly comment. One was the question that you put, where do we find possibilities for additional revenues? And I think Jürgen talked about taxes, but taxes is only one revenue stream, and it is more or less the same. Our tax base is very, very thin, so to tax those that are taxed already more has its own risks. And we have proposed some broadening measures, that is with the presumptive tax, that we brought in a hitherto untaxed section of the economy. We have some deepening measures like the solidarity tax and administrative fees. I think so that is the one alternative. The other alternative is what we have just now discussed. The state has not managed well to leverage income off its assets. Now that opens a whole range of revenue streams that can be factored into the budget. Whether it is through partial listing, whether it is through PPP arrangements, whether it is through a restructuring of the SOEs and putting more emphasis on dividends from these entities. I think we are far from having optimized the utilization of our assets. And I think that is one of the main jobs that we have to do, to see how better can we utilize our assets. On the tax administration, yes, I think it is suffering sometimes. And that has a bad effect both into the business world but also into the public sector, because we do not get what we should get when our system of collection is weak. What we are therefore trying to do is to improve administration. We are now aiming at lifting the tax administration into an e-platform so that we can administer the run-of-the-mill tax administration electronically and free experts to do the more difficult part, that is the transfer pricing, the debt collection, those areas where more effort must go in to improve the effort. We are thinking that a semi-autonomous tax authority will have a better chance to attract the necessary expertise to do these difficult jobs, and therefore free up some resources and induce some efficiencies. The partial listing of SOEs, I think that is a matter that now needs to be discussed. We must consult how we are going to do it, but it will of course also bring about investment opportunities for domestic assets that are hitherto not finding investors' homes. So I think there is a ripple effect also from that angle to be seen. There are economic opportunities that are opening through these listings. One topic that we have not yet touched upon is is still an economy that produces what it doesn't consume, and it consumes what it doesn't produce. So I think we must become very serious with industrialization and with improving our productive capacity. The whole economy is still, by and large, a primary sector-based economy. We are sitting in the first two linkages of any value chain. That's pretty much at the bottom of the value chain. We do not get the necessary and the optimal value share out of our natural resources, out of our God-given wealth, and we are therefore not able to share that potential wealth that we always talk about. We say we are a rich country with poor people. The trick that we have not managed to do is to translate that potential value in wealth, in money in the pockets of our people. I think that needs to happen through the industrialization efforts that will come. I agree, sometimes one is stunned by these obvious facts. We sit on a water reserve that carries winter for 7 years, but we have not the ability to use it. So what is the principal problem? The problem is not that we have too little water. The problem is that we are lacking, one, the infrastructure to bring the water to where it is used, and then we have a problem with pulling through, developing these infrastructures, prioritizing them so that they are timely used. And I think one of the main reasons why that is so difficult is that our system is not good in putting the common good, the common benefit as the most important and non-negotiable benefit. It does it differently. There are personal benefits, there are sexual benefits, there are other benefits that are put before the common good as a priority. I think that is what the soft issues, the more difficult issues that we need to tackle. That is where we have to zoom in. If we have an SOE sector that consequently puts the common good up front and says, well, we must chase that common good, then we will get there, then we wouldn't have a crisis. But we are not doing it.
Huge mindset shifts, paradigms that need to shift. You talked about the business culture that must change in this country, Minister. Mr. Thiemann, and then I would like to come to the first person on the floor, please, for a question after Mr. Thiemann's contribution.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Minister just opened a very passionate topic of mine again, and I think we're looking at too few basics why we have, for example, poverty. One of them is the other day my godboy gets a transport allowance, an expeditionary order of 400. He said, but please give it to me in cash, because otherwise I have to pay $17 for protection cost. Now, we have to think about that. Then he has to give up $17 for 400. We've got other examples where a speaker this morning was saying we've got people with the least live the furthest away from the center of town. And about poverty alleviation, we need to think of maybe having transport for free. Can you imagine how many people in Windhoek spend about between $800 and $1,000 a month just on transport? And I know how many people would be taken into the non-poverty income level by just addressing some of those basics. And then we have another great example. One of the greatest resources we have in Namibia is fishing, and it's more than a disaster. We have the situation where we have quota rights being allocated for a few beneficiaries at the expense of adding value in Namibia. The current companies, and they have reduced, have not got the money to even invest in value add. No, but we're exporting raw material. And sometimes, I always use the word, it's actually the thing I'm using on bring thinking to everything. We are not bringing thinking to everything. And many people don't understand what thinking means. Thinking often is not just reflecting of what you've told before. It's of finding ways of doing it differently. That's thinking.
Very good. A first question from the floor. I think I see some people this morning also, Minister, there was an occasion where the
the broadening of the tax base and looking at revenue sources. Has the ministry ever had a look at the possibility of amnesty, giving amnesty, blanket amnesty, to a broad section of society, or introducing some sort of filter to be able to encourage people to come into the tax system so that they don't stay away for fear of penalties and all the rest of it. And then secondly, my other question is also around the industrialization of our country. I think it is a commendable thing that we want to achieve, but don't we think that we're kind of missing the curve in the sense that we've moved away from a post-industrialization into a knowledge-driven economy globally? So do we still want to follow the route of industrializing, or do we also want to maybe follow a two-pronged approach where we say, listen, let's try and get like a knowledge economy going, similar to what Kenya is doing or Rwanda is doing, where they're encouraging people to develop technology and not necessarily trying to beneficiate the resources in the ground. Thanks.
Minister, you can go ahead and answer, please.
Okay. Thank you. Two questions here. One is about tax amnesties. But there's a principal problem of rewarding defaulters that is underlying tax amnesty. So I think we do not necessarily want to do that. If a regime is showing that the tax burden results in both an inability to pay and therefore building up a resistance and unwillingness to pay, then that system needs to be tweaked so that the ability and the willingness to pay is restored. I'm not so sure whether that is always achieved by amnesties. So it is a tool in the toolbox, but it is not the first that strikes my eye. I think we need to move in a direction where we prevent arrears to come to a level where these fears for penalties and interests are influencing the willingness and the ability to pay. So better administration, more timely refunds, more timely and quicker turnaround times, I think is the way to go. But I'm not throwing it away completely. Now your second question is a little bit of it's not as easy to answer than the first. But we do say this notion that you can develop an economy by not industrializing and just leapfrogging into a knowledge-based economy or a service-based economy. I don't think that is the optimal way for Namibia to go. I do believe that through our endowment in raw materials, there is competitive edge to industrialize based on that availability of raw materials. We don't have to industrialize in areas where we find it difficult, but if we have diamonds, gold, silver, semi-precious stone, why don't we build an jewelry industry? What we are doing as a economy packed at the bottom of the value chain is we are throwing away about 70% of the value chain. We are happy with sitting with about 20% or 30% of the potential value of a value chain for a raw material. So the answer is probably we have to find niche activities or niche markets where we are good at industrializing and adding value, but equally at the same time where we have an opportunity in the services industry like tourism. I think it's a good example. If I look at the UK economy, and I'm not an expert on the UK economy, but what happened there during Thatcher's time, it deindustrialized. Move on to a service-based economy. And I think some of it is biting them now, if I compare it to Germany or other economies that stuck with industrialization. think we would do well if we are better, if we improve our production capacity in some areas, but at the same end not throw away the remainder. The last point on that, if you look at the World Trade Organization's agenda and global trade, the battle started with market access. And the developing world has lost that battle. We have given market access without having developed and without having linked it to building up our productive capacity so that we have a better market access and a higher value market access with finished goods in their markets. We have plain lost that battle. Our productive capacity remained basically the same, but we have opened the markets. So the wind is in our face. The next battle on the trade front will be intellectual property, knowledge. If you look at the ratings for developing countries, innovation is in the lowest categories. We have got very shallow capacity in innovation, in creating patents, in capturing value out of a knowledge-based economy. And it will take a long time until we have it. So yes, it must be a goal. It must be a goal to improve innovation. But to place the fortunes of the nation and its people into a dream that is very, very difficult to attain, where you have competitive edges in things that you can do immediately, I think would not be a wise approach. So I think therefore the path to industrialize and move up both sides of the value chain, on the input side and on the output side, plus doing some work on the services side and the knowledge side is the way to go. So we have to have a multi-pronged approach to achieve higher returns for our people.
Thank you, Minister. Another question from the floor? If you would just raise your hand and then we'll bring the microphone to you. There's a gentleman at the back. Your name, please, Martin. If you would stand, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Plus, Honorable Minister. It's the first time that I'm in the same house with the Honorable Minister of Finance. Thanks so much. My name is Parazis Nepolo. I'm an ex-co member of NCCY, Windhoek branch, and I'm a Managing Director of Millennium Refrigeration and Electrical Services. I actually have a comment. According to the lady from KPMG, she really made something that awake my mind, saying probably other investors or other companies are investing outside the country just to avoid paying more tax. It's true. We from the business industry, we sometimes are afraid when we hear Minister of Finance, we almost see already arrested. Because when they write your letter, what you are looking for first is a figure. How much am I penalized? And what I want to commend is maybe Minister of Finance should really come close to the business family, educate them, tell them that they are not enemy, the reason why they are collecting funds. Because there are some entrepreneurs that they don't know why they're paying tax. Just to educate them a bit and sensitize them a bit. I recommend that we maybe reduce a bit of our tax to accommodate our upcoming entrepreneurs and having the right system in that place. And having more companies paying tax, because I believe it's better to sell more products than trying to make profit from one customer. I believe once the tax is a bit reduced and have more companies that are paying, I think Minister of Finance will do much better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's always interesting for me to watch the non-verbal tones in somebody's communication. Clearly that gentleman is in business. but it was interesting for me how he continuously rubbed his tummy, Minister, as he was speaking. So that's just very interesting. So he's speaking about something that is close to his heart and his tummy.
Well, I think it is a fact of life that no one likes to pay tax, and everyone likes to be exempted of paying tax. But of course, that is not affordable for any or for our situation at least. I do agree that tax education is important, and I think we have started with the financial literacy campaign that has a tax component in there. I think we should step it up so that the tax system, the benefits of paying tax and how we spend that tax money is better explained to the citizenship, that the willingness to pay tax is improved. Now, there was a comment to say that you must be, or when you go to the receiver, you are already as if you are arrested. On the one hand, that's not a good thing, because the taxman should not be an institution you are fearful of. But if you are not in compliance, you must know that you are in deep trouble. And I think that is the balance we must find. We have cases where large companies, multinational companies, have access to our resources. And the last time they paid tax was 1993. Now, something is principally wrong. If a system perpetuates the allocation of resources, access to resources, to an entity that is not, apparently, not profitable. And I think we must devise strategies that when we give access to our resources, and that entity that receives that access is not paying tax, saying it is not profitable, we must then take it back from them and give it to someone who is profitable and who pays tax. I think that is a measure that really needs to be taken serious, because we cannot go on wasting our resources. And I'm saying it because I know that that entity is in fact profitable. It's the profits that are paid somewhere else, and I think Lucas talked about transfer pricing. It's a huge problem, but it's a complex issue. And I think we should not only try to fight it at the end when it has happened. We have tools in the toolbox like access to that very resource to engage when we see it has happened.
Lady in the red jacket there. If you would just stand there, then she'll be able to see you.
Good afternoon, Honourable Minister. I would just like to comment, although I agree with Mr. Galachap's note that we should be looking at the revenue line, I think the biggest concern is not the pilferage, but the leakage of projects that are taken on and not completed and then have to be redone and so forth. So even though we focus on the top line, if there's constant leakage on expenditure and we're going beyond just social and health, relevant projects like dams that should have been completed or classrooms or so, how do we curb that to ensure that if there is direct investment into the country, the infrastructure is actually in place to allow for growth in that sector?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I agree with you. There is leakage. I think we have an issue with value for money. There are a number of examples that I can share with you. In the pharmaceutical areas, for instance, we have been subjected to a system where when we purchase ARVs through local agents, those ARVs are 3 times the price price than we would have received or could purchase them if we would have gone directly to the manufacturer. So that kind of leakage is unnecessary and needs to be improved. I think what Mr. Gabba meant is if you are serious with your efforts to live within the means that you have, your top line is the most important one. You must have the necessary revenue streams that sustains your expenditure plan. Leakage is a secondary problem. It's equally important, but it becomes less important if you haven't got the top line right. You don't worry about the expenditure in the first place. You can't make it. But your argument, of course, is still valid because of the value for money consideration. What we want to do, of course, is to improve our chance to get the best deal, the best value for money through transparent procurement methods, whether it is the PPP procurement or the public procurement, or have I misunderstood you?
Yeah, but my point is more, you can improve the top line, but if the same type of leakages are going on in the middle line, your bottom line will inevitably remain
You
the
must
same.
improve both, and there,
Yeah.
that's where we
And
need.
what are we doing in that instance? Do we bring in the private sector to oversee successful implementation of these projects so that we can build a stronger infrastructure for investment? Because likewise, I mean, I don't think you're going to get, and we see this in South Africa, international investment is pulling out because the infrastructure isn't right in that country.
What we must get around is, you see, the private sector is not a homogeneous body that I'm talking to. Most, if not all, of that leakage goes into the private sector. It doesn't find its way back into the public sector. So the beneficiary of that leakage is some entity in the private sector. What we must cut out is the illegitimacy, how that benefit accrues to that entity. That is the job of the public sector. And I think there we can work together with the private sector to create these legal frameworks and these administrative and procedural frameworks that reduces or avoids that chance that leakages can happen and make the delivery rate of the budget less efficient.
Mr. Tima, I'd like to ask you just to join this conversation, maybe to speak specifically because I'd like us to move to the conversation about the implementation rate and just how effective we deal with our money in this country.
Yeah, actually, I like what the previous speaker said, the lady in red. The thinking about how we can apply our resources more effectively, I think there's a need for it. Certainly, when we look at the education budget, which is massive, and so little is coming off that, I think we have to review. I mean, that's what the minister's job, unfortunately. But the way we spend education, I think, could be much improved. A lot of the infrastructure we talked to the minister, also the 7 years or 8 years reserve water. Again, there's so many ways of doing it differently and better. We talked about the service industry, and we have basically the game in this country and the wildlife. And if you look at NWR, it's clear I've never seen how an asset is so well positioned and can't make money. Where in fact the private sector doesn't even have a chance to compete with NWR or having a logic within the Tosha also. But I think if we would have better discipline and better accountability and you said it, performance management, the people that don't perform need to get out, and we need to continue, or we need to be brave enough to take people out that don't perform. And because at the end of the day, that is at the expense of the poor. And we can do what we want. We can do what we want to build or create. If it's not done properly, it will be at the expense of the poor.
Mr. Gabba?
We can only spend what we have. You can cut until you are blue, but there comes a point where you stop all the leakages. There comes a point of expenditure where you're going to hit the ball. So there's an optimal point where you can deal with your expenses. your ligatures. What we need to do, if you look at the cuts the minister has made, the savings he's introduced, you know, I feel for him, there's very little wriggle room for him. There's a point where he's going to cut the bone, which is going to be suboptimal. The real answer for us is how do we come up with alternative sources of revenue for our country? That is the big answer, and the minister is talking about triple Ps, partial listings. That's the area that we need to heighten in terms of, and it's not only the government, it's, you know, how do we get the private sector to extend the reach of the government? Can we get the private sector, particularly with the developmental budget, to identify some bankable projects in the country and approach the government to say, you don't have to do all these things yourself. Let's talk about that, because you are limited in terms of your revenue base. That's where I'm coming from.
Very good. There's somebody at the back, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Hansen, just for some contributions again. Your name, sir, please.
Thank you. This is Leonard Kami. I would like to aside my time a little bit because the issue I'm going to ask maybe is also too close to my time. A provocative question for the minister. I think we always listen to speeches, budget speeches year after year, very wonderful goals being pronounced. I think today we all say we have water crisis, we have energy crisis, we have land crisis. You think about all these things, it boils down to one thing, indecision. You are discussing about Kudu and financing Kudu for 20 years. Nothing is done. You are discussing about water in the central region for 20 years. Today, you can't say when water will be sorted out. In your speech yesterday, you mentioned about these things that we're building infrastructure. Are we really serious, or are we simply massaging these problems? When will we sort out the water? I think it is unfortunate if you speak even to non-water doesn't tell you that this problem will come to an end by this time. As long as our rhetoric doesn't get to the point where we give concrete promise and we can hold you accountable next time when you come. You promise to solve the water problem, it is not sorted. You promise to sort out the land problem, it is not sorted. At the end of the day, we will just be massaging all these problems. We understand the constraints that are there, but I think sometimes maybe we could do much better. We're talking about performance management. To what extent are you willing? Can we hold you accountable next time you come and present the budget and say, Mr. Minister, you said you were going to implement this performance management system, but yet we think in this area people didn't perform. What has been done? When will you tell us the penalties that are going to be introduced, the rewards that are going to be introduced? These are necessary things which you have recognized, but I think it is not yet complete. The speech wasn't complete because it didn't tell us when this whole thing will be done.
Thank you, sir.
Just
Your
one
second
quick
question.
one.
Just very
Yeah,
quick.
second question. We talk about poverty. If you look about it, extending safety nets and all these things, increasing the safety nets, aren't we helping people to survive in poverty rather than focusing on getting them out of poverty? In getting them out of poverty, what exactly are we doing? Because there's a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you. See some very big questions.
Thank you. We have the possibility to engage about and talk long about spilled milk and what we haven't done and what we should have done. I think that is one area where we can go into. But I think, I don't think that is a fruitful debate. I think it is equally unrealistic to expect in a budget speech to have all the solutions readily at hand and spelled out. What I've tried in the budget speech to do is to say, yes, in the SOE area, we recognize the weaknesses, We have now created a new ministry tasked with solving and reviewing all the weaknesses in the SOE sector, and that is unfolding. And there are a number of aspects that these SOEs, that the reform will entail. It will include performance contracts, it will include an emphasis on dividends that these entities have to pay. It will refocus on the need to deliver affordable, reliable, and sustainable services to the citizens and make the economy a competitive economy. That is all there and has been reiterated. I think the process is unfolding. Equally with social safety nets, I think it would be wrong to recognize that there are deep seats of poverty, meaning there are people that cannot help themselves because they have got de facto no means to engage in any activity. They don't even have means to survive. I think it would be wrong to say, forget them, don't utilize public resources to improve their chance of survival, and go the next step, improve their chance to move beyond the poverty line. That is why I indicated in the budget speech, we are doing both. We are strengthening the safety nets to make sure that no one falls through the net, but we are also equally trying to create economic opportunities for those that are still in poverty, so that they move out of the social grant scheme and have the ability to help themselves. And I think there are not only concrete plans, there are structures in place that are doing exactly that. We have the old age grant that helps people that are beyond their productive life, but had no ability and no chance to save for the years after the productive life. We are helping them to still have a dignified life and be outside the poverty. I think that's very proper, and that should be maintained. In fact, our commitment to improve that to 1,200 is firm, and it will happen. We have the foster parents and orphans grant schemes. I think it is a must. If a kid loses the parents, the breadwinners, and there is no one else to take over the responsibility to make sure that that child gets an education and has a reasonable chance to engage in productive activity, that would be a grave mistake to our youth and our children. So I think these safety networks must be strengthened, and we must be making sure that none of these vulnerable entities or people, whether it is children, whether it is old people, whether it is disabled people, are falling through that and land themselves in a hopeless situation. I think that is a no-go area. We must carry on with it, and I know that every economy that is a responsible one, every government that is a responsible one, has that same approach. Human beings are the same. A rich man is just nothing else but a poor man with money. We are all the same, and the responsibility for government is to treat everyone in a way that you have a decent chance to have a satisfactory life. Your argument that the economic opportunities must be great, yes, I agree. And I think through the Procurement Act, through the establishment of the Poverty Eradication Ministry, through reforms of the economy, structural reforms in the economy that makes the economy more inclusive, there are, in fact, concrete actions already implemented and done. If your problem is that they are not implemented strong enough, yes, then we agree, they can be improved. But to say there is nothing happening, I think it is not correct.
Good. We want to conclude. As you see, the food is almost ready. We've spent a lot of time here. But Mr. Hansen, just before we leave, and I'll ask each of you to prepare your concluding remarks, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Hansen, this question. Social spend. especially this year we have free senior and obviously we've always had primary education, but this year we have free secondary education. Namibians, often when they want to engage this specific issue, feel like they feel guilty as if they don't want to grant education for other people. But I want to ask you maybe to address how can government optimize that investment? Yes, the commitment is made. Kids are going to school at secondary school level now for free. How can we optimize that specific investment while at the other side you also have the challenge of the infrastructural realities which remain underdeveloped? Infrastructural developments. Like kids still go to school under trees in this country, but at the same time we give them free secondary education. Do you think we will have the return that we are looking for? And how can we optimize that investment?
I think I would like to answer it in this way. If you, one of the things that we as a nation always complain about is we complain about unemployment, we complain about the skills gap that is apparent in our nation. And if we grant free education, that's a commendable effort. My only problem lies with what do we do with the output. So once we've done all of this, we've incentivized people, brought them through the system. At the end of the day, how will we use what we've now produced to become productive in this nation? And I'll just give you an example. If you look at, we're talking about industrialization. So if you talk about industrialization, I take it that there should be skilled artisans. Now, if you give money to that Ministry of Higher Education, I'm just wondering whether we are addressing that issue. So let's take it now in the context of you have now put people through the system. By the end of that time, have we now provided for those people to actually find jobs within the economy? Because if you talk about industrialization, I would take it that vocational training becomes then very important. So if your vocational training is very important, we need now to direct our resources towards that. And that also speaks to things like foreign direct investment, because you need to find that a foreign direct investor is looking for some kind of school space. So I think it's probably a case in my mind that we will incentivize people, but we must incentivize people for a specific objective and to achieve specific developmental issues. And if we don't do that, that resource allocation is sort of misaligned. We will put people through. We will find many public administrators that can't find work, but you can't even find a decent plumber or a decent electrician in the country.
Good. Can I ask you, the speakers, just to conclude from your perspective, please?
We've spoken a lot on the tax side around the administration. So we're really looking forward, like the Minister has mentioned, to the e-filing. I think we're all looking forward to that, and we all hope that it's going to be implemented correctly and appropriately, and that there will be the least amount of transitional issues or errors. And then obviously we're also looking forward to the revenue agency. My understanding of a revenue agency, especially with the combination of the e-filing, is that now you're freeing up resources. So instead of people sitting there manually assessing returns, those people are now available to provide customer service. And that's who we are. We are customers in that revenue. And I think along with the revenue agency, we're going to need a huge mindset shift, especially on the side of inland revenue. So very exciting things coming in the future, and I do hope that it will be everything we're expecting it to be.
Mr. Hansen, I'll be fair to give you another chance, where you've just spoken. Concluding.
Oh, concluding. Thank you. I think for me, I would like to get to a point where accountability becomes the buzzword. We said something last year, we said something this year. Now I know that the Honourable Minister that probably does not have control over all these things. But if we have set out to do a specific initiative, And if I just take some of these things, we've talked about the mid-year budget review that was implemented last year. So we will have that again. And I would like to see more of those where, we can actually measure where we go into. If we talk about an unemployment, in the States what they have is they say, we are happy to have a 5% unemployment rate. And they work towards that because that is a specific goal. And if we can have that in our nation where we say, these are specific things that we've now put out, then all of us can work towards that. And we can actually measure, midterm review or quarterly review, or even annual review, we measure that to make sure that we actually move on that path that we set up for ourselves. Because currently what we have, it's almost like you're shooting, but you're shooting in the dark. And there's nothing that you can really aim for. Now I understand that there is Vision 2030, I understand it's NPF and all of that, but it just feels to me that we are moving along a path that we're not sure exactly whether we are on the right path and how far we've gone on that path.
We have a coherent plan in terms of our aspirations. We can continue to cut on our expenditure line, but there will come a point where the reality will catch up with us. We need to attack the revenue line as a country if we're going to run out of headroom to cut. It's the right thing to do at this stage for consolidation, but unless we attack the revenue line, we will settle this problem for the years to come. This is a budget from the Ministry of Finance. I hope the rest of the ministries have got something that I'll call execute.
Yeah, from my side, I'm not quite 100% agree with Johannes. I think we don't have the luxury to look only at revenue. We have to look at both. How we curtail both expenses and grow revenue. I think that's what is very important. I'm exactly to what Johannes said and the previous speakers. I think we need execution. We need an attitude towards doing something for the future generation, for tomorrow. If you think about it, that the minister, myself, or any of these speakers here in front will go to grave with more than maybe the underpants. I will not be able to take my company or my house into the grave. And if we can change our attitude about that everything we do, whether it be an employee or an employer, that it is for the future, my children, the next generation, I think we are off to good things. And one thing I hope and we can do is to teach leadership. We do not have sufficient leadership in the country, and I think leadership can go far beyond what we understand as leadership. You could actually go as far as saying that every single employer could lead his life as opposed to just live his life. So leadership is absolute passion. I'm passionate about that topic, and I think if we can address that issue, we can change this country.
Thank you very much. I think I agree with what the fellow panelists have said. It is touching on several aspects. But what I want to say is we should not lose sight of the whole. At the moment, I think Namibia is not too bad a spot to live in. But we should not rest on our laurels. We should improve that spot that we are living in. We have real opportunities to get our poverty eradicated, to bring about prosperity, to improve the living standards, and to make Namibia a better place for all. But to say one thing, you can attract investors through tax incentives and through a deal that is very, very profitable from the monetary side. But if they don't enjoy to live in Windhoek, or if they don't like to live in Oshakati, they will not come. So we have to look at the whole, not only the business opportunities, we must look at the whole living standard and the ability to make Namibia a comprehensively and all-inclusive good place to stay in. And I think we have the opportunity, if we work together, if we avoid them and us attitudes across the line, whether it is across tribal lines or business lines or activity lines. As Sven said, all these quarrels, the ones that feel the loss the most are the poor. So if we gain and work together and consult together and know what we want to do, then we have a better chance to implement it and make our place a better place. I'm confident that we can. So, thank you.
Thank you very much to the panel for an excellent job. We're now going to hand over to Robert, but I would like to just ask the House for a round of applause, please, because I think they were.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to end off in John F. Kennedy's inauguration speech 1961 with the words, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. I think it's equally important. I'd just like to thank the panelists for their contributions, and for that we have a small gift that I'd like to hand over to. When the panel has taken their seats, we just ask everybody to rise. We're closing the national anthem.
Lagos media sigurno da sa para amste das die Konsens von
serve. And I'd please like to ask the minister's table to lead us with serving. There is also a table at the back